Good timers! We are off on another local historical getaway here today. This is actually just about 10 minutes from our house. We're going to be hitting upon some of the history of the great flood of 1987 that we had here in Maine. We're going to take you to 4 or 5 different sites. Most of them are going to be in either Waterville or Winslow, which is just one town over from where we live. So we're going to show you the first site here in just a minute, so we'll see you in a bit. Good timers, we are at our first stop.
What's that?
And I was just telling these guys we're at our first stop on our historic tour today.
This is my favorite historic spot.
This is Simone's favorite historic spot right here in Waterville, Maine, and it is the Starbucks Coffee. Strangely enough, it has absolutely nothing to do with the flood of 1987, but it has shut down a couple times in the past 20 years because of small little floods inside the store. There's been a couple of pipes bursting and things like that. But other than that, that's about the only flooding that's ever happened here at Starbucks. But it is historical. It's been here for 20 years, and it's a definitely a local landmark here amongst the college students, and apparently Simone as well. So we're going to drink some of this here and then be on our way to our first real stop, which is called the 2-Cent Bridge right here in Waterville, Maine, and we'll tell you about that as soon as we get there. Okay guys, we've made our way over now to Waterville, and this is behind me, the 2-Cent Bridge, which has been around for quite a while. But we're going to start our tour here. Tell you a little bit about the flood of 1987 first of all. So it was actually April Fool's Day, April 1st of 1987, and most of the snow had actually melted in the other New England states, but in Maine it was cold enough that the snow had not melted yet, and we had about 6 to 7 inches of rain in about a 3-day span, and that rain combined with all the snow melting up in the Aroostook County area of Maine made the rivers start to swell an awful lot. It actually got to about 31 feet above flood level on the Kennebec River, which is the river behind me, and flooded most of the valleys and towns and cities along the Kennebec River, including Waterville and Winslow. And we'll tell you a lot more about that here in a little bit. But damage was estimated in the $100 million range back then, equivalent to probably closer to $300 million in this day and time. So there was over 251 houses that were lost in the state of Maine, over 400 businesses affected as well. So it was quite the economic and personal impact on a lot of people around here. So hopefully we'll show you some pictures from back in the flood of 87 and can kind of compare the two today to what it looked like then to what it looks like right now. So yeah, we'll show you here the 2-Cent Bridge and tell you a little bit of history about that. All right, guys, so the Ticonic Bridge is actually what this is called originally. It's popularly known as the 2-Cent Bridge here with the locals. It is a suspension bridge that pans the Kennebec River between this city of Waterville and Winslow, which is on the other side. It is actually the oldest surviving wire cable steel suspension bridge in the United States. Originally, it was built in 1901, so workers from Waterville could easily cross the river to go to the paper mill, which is behind us here in a minute, and we'll show you that. And yeah, it was actually built in 1901 and destroyed in 1902 by a flood. Go figure. It is called the 2-Cent Bridge by locals because it actually cost 2 cents to cross this bridge, so they did used to charge a toll. That toll was actually charged right up until 1960 when the town of Waterville actually bought the bridge from the Ticonic Bridge Company. In 1990, there was a large rock concert down here along the waterfront for July 4th weekend, and too many people were on the bridge at one time, and the bridge actually began to give way. It was obviously immediately shut down for repairs on the suspension cables and on the walkway, etc., etc. So they had to reinforce this sucker to get it to stay sturdy, and it has been here ever since. All right, guys, so we are actually standing on the oldest steel wire suspension bridge in the United States. And behind me is the paper mill that used to be called the Hollingsworth and Whitney Company paper mill. It was bought by Scott Paper Company in the early 80s, and then again bought by the Kimberly-Clark Paper Company in the 1990s. Kimberly-Clark Paper Company actually shut it down in early 1997. My father actually used to work here for over 20 years, so a lot of history here in my family with this paper mill behind us. And it has been not in operation since 1997, but is used as a warehouse for a local discount surplus salvage company, we'll say, Martin's.
Oh,
so Martin's actually owns that now and uses it as one of their warehouses. So yeah, it is cold up here on this bridge today, guys. It was supposed to be another warm day, but it is freezing again. But yes, we'll just kind of scan over there. And back in the 1900s, when the Whitney and Hollingsworth Company operated this, they actually also had a pool complex in there where their workers would go and take a little relaxation dip in the pool in between their shifts. So that's kind of a cool little fact there as well. All right, as you can see over here, guys, this extends all the way to the town of Winslow, where you can walk across it during the summertime. We're not going to do that today because, once again, it's really cold out here, but this is a really cool bridge and a really cool area of the Waterville-Winslow area. All right, so I am standing here on Water Street in Waterville now, and Water Street is right along the banks of the Kennebec River, and obviously that was a big flood area back in 1987. So we'll show you the side-by-side comparison. Right in front of me is the Shay, which is a local landmark, we'll say. The Shay has been here for ungodly amount of years. I have no idea, to be honest with you, but it's been here a really long time, way before the flood of 1987, and it obviously survived the flood of 87. So yeah, we are here on Water Street, which pretty much was completely underwater from this point on back in 1987. Alright guys, so we are now standing in front of the Hathaway Creative Center right here on Water Street in Waterville as well. And the Hathaway Creative Center originally was built in 1865 and was actually the site of a dam. So the history of the Hathaway area building began in 1865 when George Alford, a citizen from Waterville, actually had a vision to erect a dam at Ticonic Falls that would potentially provide water power at the Hathaway site. And indeed it did, all the way up through the early 1900s. So this dam used to extend all the way across the river, obviously. It is now used as a fishery where they gather up fish and actually move them around to different areas of the state to populate different ponds and things like that. So still in operation, and this building is very, very old and very interesting history here behind it. The rest of the building, back in 1876, was bought by Amos Lockwood, who was a cotton manufacturer from Boston, actually, and he opened the first cotton mill here in Maine. So in 1956, guys, after the Lockwood Company ran this mill, it was actually bought by the Hathaway Shirt Company. Hathaway Shirt Company is best known for providing military uniforms during the Civil War time period. And they were operating out of a different location in Waterville right through the 1800s. But in 1955, they moved their factory down to this area and took over this mill here. They actually ran the mill until 2002, when they eventually shut down and unfortunately stopped production of Hathaway shirts. Some of the older viewers here, and I'm talking about you, JR and Walt, may be familiar with Hathaway shirts. They were worn a lot back in the 1950s and 60s. So if you guys own a Hathaway shirt, it was made right here at this mill in Waterville, Maine. So the Hathaway Mill, after Hathaway left it, sat vacant from 2002 until 2006, when a local Colby College supporter put money into the mill to have it refurbished as a business office and condominium complex. So this is now home to many rich people here, we'll say, in the area that own their residence here, and also home to a brewery and lots of medical offices. So it has been repurposed 4 or 5 times over the past 200 years. Okay guys, we've made our way onto the Winslow side of the river, and obviously in front of me you can see the back side of the former dam and the Hathaway buildings. And so yes, you can only imagine this river came all the way up to the street side, so it rose a good 30 feet or so, which is pretty remarkable when you stop and think about it and you see how high the river actually got. High enough to obviously flood the parking lots across the way, and high enough to flood lots of Winslow here, which we'll show you in just a second. All right guys, we are here at B's Snack Bar, which did survive the flood of 1987 somehow. The water, as you can see in the pictures, was all the way up to that rooftop, guys, and it was also right over the top of the railway bridge over here, which also survived the same flood. And also this bridge right here somehow survived it as well. So these three buildings and bridges, we'll say, somehow stood throughout the entire flood, unlike, unfortunately, Fort Halifax itself, which floated down the river. And also right here is Lithgow Street, and 7 houses on Lithgow Street also got swept down the river, unfortunately, on that April Fool's Day. All right, so this is pretty much the site along Lithgow Street where all 7 of the houses were lost. And part of the major problem in the flood of 1987 and why it flooded so bad here in the town of Winslow is the fact that actually right in this spot is where 2 rivers converge. So in front of me right here is the Sebasticook River, and right beside it is the Maine River of the Kennebec. The Kennebec River is actually the biggest river in Maine. So, but these 2 converge right here in Winslow on this very site, which is why the flooding was so bad back in 1987, because of the ice melt and ice jams on both of these rivers. And so right here on Lithgow Street, guys, is this large rock, which they've actually built a plaque into. And this marks the actual place where Benedict Arnold and his men landed on their way to Quebec in 1775 as part of their Canadian expedition, where they were going to try to overthrow Quebec. And that didn't work out well for Benedict Arnold. It was shortly thereafter that he turned sides and went to the British side, and the rest is history, we'll say. But Benedict Arnold stayed at Fort Halifax, and that is going to be where we go next, and we'll tell you a little bit about Fort Halifax and the history behind that, and also what happened to Fort Halifax in 1987. All right guys, so still on Lithgow Street, and you can see in front of me the old church that is still in use. We also have the Winslow Public Library, which is right here in front of us along Lithgow Street. The public library right now is not currently in use. They actually did lose an enormous amount of books, though, during the flood of '87. And the water was actually all the way up almost to the top of these white doors here, if you can believe that. So pretty much the same height as me plus 1. So yeah, it came all the way up to the top of those white doors, the water level. And don't forget, the water is all the way across the river over here. So once again, just an enormous amount of water all at one time. Definitely not a good April Fool's Day. Yeah, nothing funny about that. But it's something that if you lived in Maine, you will absolutely never forget. It was actually nicknamed the 500-year flood, because experts say that a flood like that only occurs once every 500 years. And Pickles is apparently ice skating here on, I guess this is a sidewalk. It's all fun and games till you end up on your ass. So this church, guys, has been here since 1796. So once again, it has survived lots, including the flood of '87. There was actually another similar flood back in 1936 here in the central Maine area as well, which is also called the Great Flood until 1987. And some people lived through both of those, and they've got both of those etched in their memories forever. All right, guys, so as we're walking here back to the fort, it's a good time to tell you a little bit about the town of Winslow. It was actually incorporated in 1754 by a general named John Winslow, of all people. So that's how the town of Winslow got its name. And we are actually walking on Lithgow Street right now, which was named after General Winslow's captain, and his name was William Lithgow. So there you go, a little bit of history about the town of Winslow. It was actually originally occupied by Indians back in the 1600s and was parlayed, we'll say, to the Americans. In other words, gifted or taken by the Americans back in the 1600s, and later on became known as the town of Winslow. Alright, so this blockhouse is the only building that remains of the larger fort complex. The complex was originally built in 1754 to defend the upper Kennebec River Valley from possible attack from the French in Canada and their Native American allies. So the building, after the French and Indian War, remained unused until 1775, when Benedict Arnold started his Quebec campaign over in Canada. Benedict Arnold stopped his troops here and spent the evening basically and housed them here at this complex. This was the oldest blockhouse in the United States, unfortunately, until 1987, when at some point on the evening of April 1st, right around 9 p.m. is what a few onlookers say, it came off of its foundation and floated down the Kennebec River, washed away by the flood. As you can see, guys, the different colored wood that we have here in the blockhouse. Now, farther downriver, about 35 miles, a few weeks after the flood of 1987, they found 25 pieces of this wood and used them to rebuild it only 1 year later. So it washed away in 1987, and by the end of 1988, this was completely rebuilt with some of the original wood. Once again, found 35 miles down the river. And this is open to the public during the summer, and you can actually go inside. And see the view from the top of it as well. So, but yes, this is the last remaining blockhouse from the original fort. And Pickles, try not to fall off the side of the bank, because you're going to end up in the Sebasticook River. For many years, guys, the town of Winslow held a huge fireworks display here in this park. It was actually the largest display in the entire state of Maine. It was really cool watching it, of course, with the fort in the background and all the history of this little area. They have discontinued that, unfortunately, for the past 3 or 4 years, and it's held in different towns now. But yes, it used to be a huge fireworks display and outdoor concert here every 4th of July.